Welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're journeying into the eerie and thought-provoking world of the Twilight Zone. Created by Rod Serling, this anthology series blurred the lines between science fiction, fantasy and social commentary, captivating audiences from 1959 to 1964. While the episodes left an indelible mark on pop culture, there's much more to the show than meets the eye. So put on your tinfoil hat as we reveal 20 things you never knew about the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling, the host and creator, also wrote the vast majority of its episodes. While many of his stories drew from the turbulent events of the 1960s, a significant source of inspiration came from his own dreams. Serling kept a tape recorder on his bedside table, ready to capture any dreams he recalled upon waking. Whether they were pleasant or unsettling, these dreams often became the foundation for numerous episodes of The Twilight Zone. 2 episodes were originally conceived as pilots for potential spin-offs. Throughout the show's run, its creators were eager to develop a continuation of one of its stories. The episodes Mr. Beavis and Cavender is Coming were crafted specifically to persuade CBS to greenlight them as standalone series. Interestingly, both episodes featured guardian angels as central characters. However, neither managed to captivate the executives, and both spin-off ideas were ultimately abandoned. Although Serling was contracted to write the majority of scripts during its 5-year run, it was impossible for him to handle every episode. To keep up with the demands, he relied on writers like Richard Matheson, Charles Beaumont, and George Clayton Johnson to provide story ideas or complete scripts. Serling also approached science fiction luminaries such as Arthur C. Clarke and Ray Bradbury. While Clarke was unavailable, Bradbury contributed several scripts, though only one was aired, an adaptation of his short story, I Sing the Body Electric. Despite this collaboration, Serling later remarked that Bradbury's work seems to lend itself to the printed page rather than spoken language. Bradbury, perhaps stung by the comment, accused Serling of the ultimate literary offence, plagiarism. Offended by the claim, Serling publicly stated his deep admiration for Bradbury. However, it remains unclear whether the two ever mended their relationship before Serling's death in 1975. When Serling recorded his iconic opening narration for the pilot episode in 1959, he referred to a 6th dimension to be explored. A CBS executive, however, questioned him on this, asking why he had skipped over a 5th dimension. After all, weren't there only 4? Caught off guard, Serling admitted he hadn't given it much thought. Oh, he replied, aren't there 5? To avoid a flood of complaints from physicists, the narration was promptly re-recorded. The first episode takes place in a picturesque American town with a big square at its heart. At one end stands the courthouse, while a cinema occupies the other. The episode was filmed at Courthouse Square, a set on the Universal Studios backlot. This iconic location has appeared in countless productions, from To Kill a Mockingbird to Back to the Future, and remains in use to this day. Director Richard Donner helmed Nightmare at 20,000 feet, the gripping tale of a passenger, played by William Shatner, who spots a monster tampering with the wing of his airplane. When his warnings are dismissed as delusions, Shatner's character takes drastic action. He opens the emergency exit and shoots the creature with a revolver stolen from a police officer. True to the show's fast-paced production schedule, the shoot was completed in just 3 days. Adding to Donner's stress, Shatner and co-star Ed Burns staged a prank during filming. The two pretended to fight on the wing, ending with them throwing a Shatner-sized dummy to the concrete below. Donner, initially horrified, later joked that his first thought was they'd need to find another actor to start over. If you're enjoying the video, a subscribe to the channel would be the beginning of your journey into the unknown. The seat William Shatner occupies holds special significance, as its window provides the clearest view of the plane's wing. In real life, these windows are identified by a small black triangle to make them easy to locate. Fittingly though, the seats next to these marked windows are often referred to as William Shatner's seats. In Cavender is Coming, an angel is sent to Earth to help Carol Burnett's character discover happiness, a journey that ultimately reveals she had it with her all along. This was one of the episodes filmed as a pilot, and CBS believed it had potential to be a sitcom, so for the first and only time in The Twilight Zone, a laugh track was added. However, audiences didn't take kindly to the forced humour. Cavender never became a series, and the laugh track was removed for syndication and home video release. One Twilight episode won an Oscar, sort of. As the budget for the series tightened during its fifth and final season, Serling implemented an unconventional cost-cutting measure. He purchased the rights to broadcast an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, a French short film based on Ambrose Bierce's story about a Confederate sympathizer who narrowly escapes hanging at the end of the Civil War. The film was nearly silent, requiring no dubbing, and its haunting cinematography was a perfect fit for the show. The previous year, the short had won an Oscar for Best Short Subject. Interestingly, Bierce's story was also adapted for an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, marking the only time both anthology series used the same source material. Many actors made multiple appearances on The Twilight Zone, but only one holds the unique distinction of featuring in all 5 seasons. Robert McCord made 75 appearances according to Twilight Zone Museum. He is credited in 32 episodes, with only a few being screen credited, and the rest are in the role of an extra, sometimes appearing as more than one character in an episode. Although The Twilight Zone saw reboots in 1985, 2002, and in 2019, it only has one episode with a direct sequel. The Season 3 episode It's a Good Life from the original series was revisited in the 21st Century reboot. Cloris Leachman and Bill Mumy reprised their roles as the mother and her mind-controlling son, making them the only actors to appear in both the original and 2002 series. The phrase Twilight Zone originated in the early 1900s, initially describing a liminal state between fantasy and reality. Over time, its meaning expanded. It was used to define the deepest layer of the ocean where light still penetrates, and later adopted as an aeronautical term by the US Air Force. When Serling was asked about the inspiration for the title, The Twilight Zone, he admitted, "I thought I'd made it up, but I've since learned it's an Air Force term referring to a moment when a plane is on approach and the horizon isn't visible. It's called the Twilight Zone, though it's an obscure term I hadn't heard before." It's plausible, however, that Serling had encountered the term but forgotten its origin. His time as a paratrooper during World War II, or the influence of his brother Robert Serling, who was an aviation editor for United Press International, could have been the source. Though Richard Matheson, the writer behind episodes Steel and The Invaders, always spoke highly of Rod Serling, there was one rule he found puzzling. According to Matheson, only Serling was allowed to use the word God in his teleplays. For the rest of the writing team, it was strictly off limits. Matheson recalled, "I used to get ticked off at Rod because he could put God in all his scripts. If I did it, they'd cross it out." Despite his frustration, Matheson never asked and was never given an explanation for the rule. It remains one of the many mysteries worthy of the Twilight Zone. Initially, Rod Serling wanted to give aspiring writers a chance to break into the industry. In the 1960s, if you were an amateur writer or simply a fan of the Twilight Zone, you could send in a script for consideration. A staggering 14,000 scripts were submitted, and Serling personally read about 500 of them. However, none of them were ever turned into an episode. Serling later stated that only 2 scripts were any good, but they didn't fit the show's format. Serling's iconic on-camera introductions didn't become a regular feature until the 2nd season. In the 1st season, Serling only appeared on screen during the promotional segments for the following week's episode. In the 50s and 60s, nearly every television show used film, but those with tighter budgets often had to rely on videotape as a more affordable alternative. The Twilight Zone found itself in this position when CBS insisted on using tape to reduce costs. However, videotape proved challenging to shoot and edit, and its quality was far from ideal. Frustrated with the limitations of tape, the showrunners eventually abandoned it and returned to using traditional film. In the early 1980s, Warner Brothers adapted The Twilight Zone for the big screen. with renowned directors such as Steven Spielberg and George Miller remaking some of the series' most famous episodes. Tragically, during the filming of one segment, a stunt helicopter crashed on set, resulting in the deaths of an adult actor and 2 child actors. John Landis, the director of that sequence, was charged with involuntary manslaughter. After a 9-month trial, Landis was acquitted by a jury in 1987. Later, an out-of-court settlement with the families of the victims was reached. Submitted for your approval, the phrase that has become synonymous with the show was only uttered 3 times over the course of 5 seasons. Serling used the signature phrase in the introductions of the episodes, "Cavender is coming," in praise of Pip, and a kind of stopwatch. Over the years, there have been countless parodies and tributes to the Twilight Zone, but writer and director J.J. Abrams wanted something more original than a simple imitation of Serling. For a 2000 episode of his 20-something drama Felicity, Abrams crafted a storyline set in a dreamscape filled with paranormal events. To capture the show's black and white visuals, Abrams enlisted Lamont Johnson, one of the original directors of The Twilight Zone, who was 77 at the time. The episode received critical acclaim. A long-time admirer of Serling, Abrams also purchased his final script, The Stops Along the Way, in 2013, with plans to produce it as a limited series. In 1979, the band Manhattan Transfer released the disco hit Twilight Zone, Twilight Tone, which featured the high-pitched guitar riff familiar to fans of the show. The track became somewhat of a hit, reaching the top 30 on the US and UK charts. And there you have it, folks. You now know a little bit more about the Twilight Zone. If you enjoyed the video, which I presume you did as you got this far, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos coming to Rocky Watches Movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.